Welcome to God Have Mercy.
Matt, how are you?
I'm doing good, John.
I know you are. You actually, Jeff, I don't want to disturb you. He's not doing well.
I'm doing well.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sensing.
Dear Lord.
See? Anyway.
Don't you tell me how I feel, John Stevens.
All right, so just so we know, months and months and months ago, we had planned to have a conversation around church faith politics, particularly around Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
And we were doing this partly because there's going to be a program at our church with our senior adults, and a lot of people are going to gather and talk about this content. And we said we're going to do it as a podcast so we can push it out to beyond just one group.
Yeah.
And we can all talk about it. So little did we know when you plan things in advance, this is how it works, that there would be a lot of focus around or interest or maybe controversy over a topic like this. That's not really our goal. We're trying to really come at this thing in a way that helps Christians understand how our faith intersects with politics, particularly.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Are you okay? Are you okay to do this?
Yeah, I feel great about it, John.
Sure. Good. By the way, don't read anything into this. It doesn't have anything to do with the topic we're talking about. It's just, we're just trying to make sure everybody's good, right, Jeff?
Checking in.
He's just checking in. Yeah. How is it with your soul? It's a good. Anyway, so this topic of Christian nationalism or faith in politics is always one that you have to navigate carefully. I think a couple of things that are important for me to set the stage is something I think a guy named David French wrote an article about, and he said one of the worst mistakes we can do is define Christian nationalism too broadly. Because what it does is it will risk lumping millions of ordinary church-going people with actual Christian nationalists.
Yeah.
Just because you're a Christian and you live in the United States and maybe you have
And you like America.
and you love America and you may be interested in politics, that does not
And you own a flag.
and you have a flag in your front, does not make you a Christian
Okay, good.
nationalist. All right, so we're trying not to get too overtly broad with the definition. And a couple of things that are important for us to know, right? We believe, I believe as a pastor, that it is very important for Christians to be able to protect the rightful place of their own faith values, the things that are important to them in their faith, to allow that to be a part of their intersection with public debate or politics or anything else. I mean, don't you? Your faith should guide you.
Yes.
I mean, this can we talk about here? It's like your faith should guide you in everything.
Yes.
It doesn't turn off when you're dealing with your politics.
Right.
So as long as you're not working against the role of the church or you're not working against the role of or the principles of the teachings of Christ, or I would even say working against democracy, I mean, then the intersection of your faith and values is okay.
Yes.
And I would also say that it is important to say that you can be a Christian and you can be patriotic.
Yes.
Anybody who thinks somehow you can't be patriotic if you're a Christian is like, I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah. And I think it's also begs to say that what shapes what? Does your Christianity shape the way you look at politics, or does your politics shape the way, or is there a bleeding of the two? And I think that's where the subject we'll talk about today is kind of unparsing and unweaving threads that have been woven together in the history, some of our history, and to be able to take those strands apart and say, oh, we can look at these individually.
Correct. A Christian can be patriotic as long as love of country does not exceed love of God or supersede their primary allegiance to God's kingdom.
Yes. And if they don't pray for the Cowboys. That's really the
Dallas Cowboys?
Yes.
Yes. The Alice Cowboys? Because they don't play. There's no D. There's no D. So it's the Alice Cowboys. I think healthy Christian patriotism involves loving and supporting your nation, being a responsible citizen. But that also means that you can critique the government. You can critique a political party when they are not operating according to the values of what we believe, the values of what Jesus would stand up for. It's okay. We just don't want to elevate the nation, right, or the government or a political party to some central position that is opposite of God's purpose or takes more of our energy and focus and devotion than that would be a form of idolatry.
Yes, when you wed those two things together in power, it's never worked out well for Christians. We can move back to Constantine when we wed religion and politics together.
Yeah.
Because then you can yield and wield a sword to exact what you want, and you end up making moves both politically, but in the name of God, that end up marginalizing the very people that Jesus stands with. And so yeah.
I always say the Christian church is always at its best when it is sort of not connected to the power structures, when we're underneath the power structures, when we're being oppressed.
Little oppression is good for Christians.
I hate saying we don't always behave well when we're in control.
Yeah.
It's like I said, I think recently, it's like, you would think, oh man, if we can just get the right person, the right Christian, the right candidate, and they could be, it's like, I have seen really good people, they get a little bit of power. Oh. They get a little bit of attention, they get a little bit of publicity. All of a sudden you start feeling like you have to say things to certain anyway, that's a whole different thing. So the last thing I'll say here is on this topic of just sort of setting the groundwork for like dispelling this whole thing that somehow you can't be connected. I believe that yes, a Christian can and should bring your values into politics, and the expectation would be that you would be politically involved if you so choose. That's rooted out of your values as a person of faith. And we see in American history particularly that Christian influences have impacted our politics in some very good ways. Like I think about the abolitionist movement and the fighting to eliminate slavery. That was rooted in a biblical Christian faith deal. A lot of the abolitionists, or the civil rights movement, wasn't totally a religious movement, but there was a lot of foundation that was faith-based, and a lot of it was Christian, from the Christian values of faith. So,
and it's also important, I think, to note that those things that were undoing those kinds of things within our history were also propped up by a type of theology that was trying to keep those very things in place.
Yeah.
And so you had people on the other side of, in the 1600s, 1700s that were said, hey, slavery is a biblical deal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm just
because,
living by the
you
word.
can have, this is the thing we have to recognize is that people, and we'll get to this in a minute, people can co-opt Jesus and co-opt the Bible for things that really aren't in keeping with the nature, the character of the heart of God.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's now that we've sort of set the stage on making sure the definitions matter, let's talk about some of the definitions of Christian nationalism. Seems to be a big thing, topic. People are like, well, what is it exactly? So we got a couple of things. There's a professor of the practice of international affairs at Georgetown, Paul Miller, has written a lot about this particular subject. He writes, Christian nationalism is the belief that the American nation is defined by Christianity and that the government should take active steps to keep it that way. So one definition of Christian nationalism is that America must remain a Christian nation, and that's not merely about Christians observing that our history is faith-based or that our history is Christian-based. That what makes it Christian nationalism is they believe that there must be a prescriptive program involved in the mechanisms of governing and power to keep Christianity as a central part of the American story. So there's a prescriptive element to it, right? That we are defined by Christianity and that the government should take prescriptive steps to keep that in place.
Yes. Yeah. It seems to me that it's a fusion of a religious identity and a national identity. You fuse those two things together, and so you defined America as a Christian nation, right? Where both kind of belonging then is predicated on your belief, on your religious kind of affiliation, on those kinds of things, right? And that then, like you said, then the government should then support a certain type, a version of Christianity. It's,
Another academic, Samuel Huntington, who taught at Harvard University's Center for International Affairs for 50 years and did a lot of the political workings and historic, says that Christian nationalism is the movement that sees America primarily defined by its Anglo-Protestant past. This is very important. Some people may remember when John F. Kennedy was nominated for president.
Catholic. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, I
remember my grandfather was like,
you and I were babes. Well, I don't even know that we were born, but
I probably was.
You were, because you're much older
older.
than I am. But I mean that the thought that we might have a Catholic president. So when people sort of like brusque up or they get a little bit offended when you say Anglo-Protestant, this is really true for us in the United States. And the Anglo part is a very part of it, is what he says is wired. So Christian nationalism believes that America will actually lose its identity and freedom if we do not preserve our Anglo-Protestant past, and that must be done through prescriptive governmental action to protect cultural and religious inheritances, which are rooted in Christianity.
Yeah.
So again, Christian nationalism has to do with, yes, Christianity, yes, a unique lane, Anglo-Protestant.
And a type of theological lens that you look through to describe yourself as Christian.
Yes. But also then the big key part is that the government should play a prescriptive role through law, through practice, through whatever, to maintain that particular identity and cultural and religious inheritance rooted in Christianity. So that's important to say. It's not necessarily an advocacy for theocracy, but what Christian nationalism will say is that Christianity enjoys and should enjoy a privileged position in the public square. Like it's higher up than the others. Higher up than Judaism, higher up than any other religion that might be,
Buddhism,
any other religion. Christianity has a privileged position, and that should be protected through prescriptive means. So there's this way that all of these academics say that these are nationalists who believe that the American identity is inextricable from Christianity and believes that Christian primacy should be at the center of politics and law. Okay. Here again, we're still in definitions. There's a book written a little bit, not that long ago, Taking America Back for God, Christian Nationalism in the United States. And again, two academics, one from the University of Oklahoma, Boomer, Samuel Perry, and from Clemson, Andrew Whitehead, who did this book together. And their common definition at it is Christian nationalism is a cultural framework that begins to blur the distinctions between Christian and American identity, seeking to preserve actually their union together. And so Christian nationalism will take the name of Christ for a worldly political agenda, proclaiming that its program is the political program of every true believer. All right, so now we get to this imposing of, here's the program, and it needs to be the program of every true believer. True believers will be the ones that see this connection of Christ needing to be at work through prescriptive governmental action in the worldly political agenda.
Yeah.
Okay? And the last one that I'll point out, Russell Moore, who I'm a big fan of. Russell Moore was a Southern Baptist leader. He was the head of their ethics and all this. They kind of had a falling out. The Southern Baptists don't really claim him anymore, and he doesn't really claim them. He stood up for transparency around sexual abuse. He stood up around seeing a lot of the conservative Christian evangelical movement cozying up too much to politicians and power. through the last couple of elections. And so he wrote a book called Losing Our Religion.
Well, you're telling me that a prophet wasn't embraced by an institution?
Yeah, the prophet.
Okay, I just want to...
And never embraced by your home. His own people, his own tribe.
That's interesting.
And they excommunicated him. He wrote a book called Losing Our Religion, an altar call for the evangelical church. I would recommend people read this.
We've talked about this book on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Before.
We talked about Wrestle More. I've tried to get him on. He's very popular and very busy, and he did respond and said he would love to do it at some point. But right when this book came out, he was really, really kind of in the news a lot. He writes about a lot, but let me just say a couple of things. You can share your thoughts on this. Is this new Christian, and then we need to move on to the next part. This new Christian nationalism, like the withered old state churches of Europe and the secularized old social gospels of mainline Protestantism, defines Christianity in terms of reforming external structures rather than regenerating internal psyches. Unlike the older theological liberalisms, Christian nationalists seek solidarity not in the actual mitigating of human suffering, but in the mostly symbolic boundary markers of taking the right amount of theatrical umbrage at culture war outrages and having the right kind of enemies. Yeah. This uneasy conscience of Christian nationalism pretends that our problem is the opposite of what Jesus told us, that somehow we can call ourselves an orchard. Just by calling ourselves an orchard, we can bring fruit from diseased trees in Matthew 7, or that by controlling what is on the outside of us, we can renew what is inside from Matthew 12. He said this message has always been popular, whether prosperity gospels or fertility religions, but that an extrinsic religion enables people to claim Christianity without actually following Christ. And that enables powerless, prayerless, porn-addicted culture warriors to convince themselves they are goose-stepping to heaven. By assuaging our guilt with our political choices, we can convince ourselves that what we find in our new Bethel is Jacob's ladder to heaven when it's really just Jeroboam's calf of gold.
Whoa.
That's prophetic.
That's... Yeah.
And
they didn't embrace him?
They didn't embrace him. He specifically is making a statement against Christian nationalism. Yeah. As a person who's a very conservative Southern Baptist pastor who sees the gospel and this tying into these the power and the government as being a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Before we move on, I want to move on to the biblical aspect of this, but a couple of other things. You know, the dimensions of Christian nationalism show up in ideological beliefs, where there literally are movements. For example, the National Conservatism Statement of Principles in 2022 said that it is Christian majorities who should shape public life and law. So that relegates anyone who's not a Christian to a second-class status in the country. So that might not be, again, you can be a Christian and say, oh, I don't believe in that. Well, you may not be a Christian nationalist either. I mean, so this is why we're differentiating. So you can say, the point of this is to help people as they're watching news or they're listening to things or they're intersecting to kind of understand, okay, is this a move? Am I moving in the wrong direction here? Is my faith maybe crossing the line? Or also, can I notice when I see it happening and know, okay, yeah, that feels uneasy to me.
Right.
That feels like...
I think some of the things that are confusing to me about this is that the language of Christianity is being used all over the place. And so even within some of these structures, we might hold beliefs of like, oh yeah, that seems right. I want God to do things in our culture, right? I think there's a difference between that and the move that you're talking about is making fundamentally, and so that it's using language and narrative and symbols in a particular form and way of a way of Christianity that's being defined in a particular way, and so I think it's important. I think that's why we're having this discussion to say, let's unweave some of these threads and say, oh, this is how Christianity has been conflated with nationalism. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And how do we, because if the narrative of Jesus is to form us, and if Paul says that that really our citizenry is not in Rome or in, America or in Europe, it is in heaven, like the kingdom of God, then our identity is fundamentally formed in a different way than nationalism. I can love America, and I can also critique it from the point of view as what you've been preaching about, Jesus's teachings, his actions, his way in the world.
Yeah. For people who may not know, historically, there is a movement called the Seven Mountain Mandate. It's a dominionist movement. It is rooted in the belief that Christians should be the ones who rule: family, church, education, media, arts, business, and government. You may have seen this come out in some ideological groups in recent years. They may not call it this, but it's rooted in this belief. This is some sort of a tied in, not quite like manifest destiny, which was our belief of expansion, but this would be kind of a Christian manifest destiny rooted to tying into the government, that we should control all of these seven mountains of life. You see that now even in like taking over the art, wanting to take over the arts, or wanting to take over business, wanting to take government, of course, media, all these sorts of things. And it can also lead to where people say, it makes Christian a qualification for office, or supporting leaders who promise to empower Christians regardless of their own personal virtue.
Yeah. And usually male leaders in that paradigm. Seriously, there's a really big movement that says actually it's the Bible says that the man is the head of the household and is a covering of the wife. If you don't read the rest of Corinthians or Ephesians.
Some people have seen this recently in news stories and things of a lot of the movement from people. Like there was even this one particular denomination or church where they say the women shouldn't vote. Now, I know that doesn't represent the vast majority of Christians, but there's a group that the man decides for the household. So instead of each person getting a vote, the household gets a vote. This way that they want to see it happen. I don't think that's going to happen. But, I've not thought a lot of things are going to happen. All right, let's talk about the Bible. We're going to make a shift here. This is not going to be a super long podcast, but we want to get enough of this in. So we talked about kind of making sure we set the table so we understand this is not as broad. We don't want to define it as broad as some people might want to. Talk about some definitions of how this intersects, particularly the prescriptive elements of government being involved. Let's talk about the Bible. So for me, there are lots of passages of Scripture that speak into this for us, but there are three we'll talk about real quick. And the first one is from the Old Testament in 1 Samuel, and that is Israel's request for a king. Do you remember the story?
I do.
You were there.
I voted. I was with Samuel.
Oh, you were with Samuel. He voted against it. So for people who may not know, in 1 Samuel 8, Israel at the Samuels and his sons were a little corrupt, and so he had been the judge and the one who's been leading on behalf of God. But the people of Israel rose up, the elders of Israel, and said, "We want a king, like all the other nations. We want a king, because we see them. We need a government of the earth, an earthly government, a king, centralized leadership, lead us in a battle, secure our nation that reflects stability and prestige, so we can be like all these other nations, all these other kingdoms. We want to be the best. We want to make Israel great again, make the Hebrews great again, or whatever you want to call them." Okay. So Samuel was very upset about this and went to God, but God told him, "They have not rejected you, Samuel. They have rejected me." God did not want to do this. God did not want them to have a king, but God gave them what they wanted. And this revealed God viewed Israel's demand as a rejection of his own rule, covenantal relationship. They had been led by priests and prophets and judges that God had spoken through. They were a theocracy. They were led by God. God was the leader. God was the king. But no, they wanted a human monarch. They wanted a governmental system. Now, Samuel warned them that if you have an earthly king, you set government up this way. He's going to conscript your sons for their armies and their labor. He's going to take your daughters for service. He's going to claim your best fields and your vineyards and your livestock. He's going to tax you. And ultimately, you will become the king's servants, the government's servants, and you will cry out for relief. So despite all of those warnings, they refused to listen. They insisted, "We want a king. And then we will be like all the other nations with a king to lead us and go out before us and fight our battles."
Can I just?
Go ahead.
It seems to me that the basis of that is a desire for certainty, am I going to be okay? Is there going to be enough for me? And that one of the wrong moves that Israel made, that we make, I think, I've made in my life a lot before, is that I make decisions based on, can I secure my life? And the gospel fundamentally is about surrendering one's life. And so I think that both in what Israel is doing and the parallel to some of the white nationalism that we're seeing is this desire, and I think it's an honest desire. I mean, I get it. It's a desire to secure us, to make sure we're secure, because ultimately Israel did not want to face the deep, deep insecurity of what it is to stand in front of the event that is called God, where they are naked and they're naked. They said, we don't want that. We don't want to stand in front of that all the time. We want a lot of space between that, with a lot of other kind of doors that are in between us and that dude, because that dude scares us, right? And I would take being conscripted in the army, being taxed, being led away, all that, because that's called security, rather than having to surrender what I don't know in the face of this God that says, stand in front of me and I will lead you and guide you.
Yeah. And it goes back to the deception of control, the deception of security.
That's right.
Because ultimately what this move does is, yes, it brings glory. You have King David, you have King Solomon, but ultimately it leads to their downfall. Yes. The division and the exile.
Yes.
And so you get what you ask for. So I think that when people talk about this nationalistic thing, we got to go back to the Old Testament and say, this is not what God wanted. God didn't want this. What God really wanted was for God to continue to be the king and guide his people, and for them to rely on him and trust in him through the covenantal relationship that was established. Now, that ship sailed a long time ago, but it's just a lesson for us before we think that to put too much trust and powers into kingdoms and realms and politics.
Is that why Jesus shows up in the New Testament and says, talks all this talk about the kingdom of God that is not a nation state? It is the revolution of a Pentecost, where not everybody is from one tribe, but from every tribe and nation. And what connects them is not an ideological top-down, but a bottom-up thing of love and sharing and openness and those kinds of things. It's like this deep mutuality. It's the widow, orphan, stranger. It's the God of the margins, all those things that we said, oh, okay, right? We tried it top down, didn't work, won't work, can't work, right?
Yeah.
But we're still, I think, drawn into that because of security.
Yeah. The second of the three scriptures is a real quick one. It comes from John 18, which you just talked about Jesus and the kingdom that he proclaims a lot. As he stands before Pontius Pilate in his trial, Pilate asks him if he was king of the Jews. And Jesus' response is, my kingdom is not of this world. He explains that if his kingdom were earthly, his followers would be fighting to prevent his arrest. Instead, he said his reign is spiritual, rooted in truth and God's authority, not in political or military power. And so as Pilate presses him further, Jesus affirms, you say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. So Jesus makes it very clear that the kingdom that he is proclaiming is not a kingdom of this world. And for thousands of years, Christians have tried to take earthly power and somehow to implement the kingdom of God, when we know that the kingdom of God is about the reign of God in hearts and souls, in systems, but it's never done well when it's tried to be prescribed from power structures, or like governments or kings or whatever.
Right. And we saw that in Pentecost, where there was a diversity of gifts that were poured out, and that everyone brought that gift, their purpose into the community to reflect what God was doing in the world. It wasn't a hierarchical, it wasn't a top-down, everyone thinks the same. In fact, it was the fact that it shouldn't work, that you've got these folks on the margin that are now in the center. There is no center. Christ is the center.
All right, so the last one, and then we'll kind of wrap this up, because I hope it just propels you to think some of this. But one of the ones that I have used a lot in thinking about how we wrestle with this is the temptations of Jesus in the wilderness, and particularly the work of Richard Rohr in this, but some others as well. That the temptations of Jesus are not just a personal thing. There is a really big message going on that has to do with economies, religion, and political systems, all about dominion and domination. So in Matthew 4 and in Luke 4, we've got Jesus in the wilderness, and he is dealing with this beyond personal struggle. These are about universal temptations to power and the ways that religion, culture, politics can lure us away from God's way. All right. So this is a temptation for Christians for 2,000 years that we've been dealing with this. So the first temptation, at least from one particular, there are different orders in different gospels, but to turn the stones into bread to satisfy your hunger. So there's this sense of a shortcut to comfort, a shortcut to security. You mentioned security, economic security, or sating your hunger. So this temptation is about using power, the power that he had to do this, for his own self-interest or for his own material control, his own consumeristic kind of need, and to use this system to promise safety or comfort or wealth and use his own power rather than to trust in God. Okay, so to turn the stones into bread is a temptation to trust our own power, our own prosperity, whether that be individualistic or our own national wealth, our own national prosperity, to secure our lives, to secure our safety and our comfort, rather than to trust God to be the one. This is a big deal because Jesus is showing and revealing that he's going to trust the Father and not use his own power to fulfill his need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
The second one, leaping from the temple. The devil takes him up, shows him all these sorts of things. Hey, if you leave, call the angels, they'll share you up. And then, of course, then he would have been like everyone would go, oh, Jesus, yeah, you got to be the Son of God. I mean, if you did that, the angels say, sure, you proved it to us. And this is the temptation of religious spectacle, again, control, manipulation of religion, manipulation of God, using God to impress, coerce, dominate other people. We see this in Christian nationalism where God, faith, the Bible is used to manipulate, to coerce, to control certain segments of society or people that you may not agree with.
It's a distortion of the Christian story at the end of the day.
Yes.
Right?
And this is what Jesus is tempted to.
Yes.
We're talking about, this is what we are tempted to as well. These
100%.
temptations are temptations we face on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And so it represents here religion aligning with political or cultural power and somehow to secure legitimacy. If he jumps and the angels save him, he's legitimately the Son of God because he did the superhero landing. He stuck it. He's proven himself.
Mary Lou Rettoned it.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden now you've used your faith as a spectacle to prove your superiority, to gain influence, to gain your status, to gain your position.
Yeah.
That is a temptation that we are all called to, and that Jesus refutes.
Yes.
He doesn't fall into that temptation.
Yes.
And then the last one is bowing to Satan to gain the kingdoms of the world. This one is all about political dominion. It is a temptation of worldly political authority. So basically this devil says, if you bow down to me and worship me, I will give you all the kingdoms of this world. It sounds like, wow, I can achieve good ends. I can be Lord over all of the kingdoms of the world. All I got to do is bend the knee, achieve the good ends through the machinery of control.
Doesn't God want Jesus to be the ruler of all?
Yes, but the way that comes again is not through domination and dominion, and control and violence and empire. Jesus refuses, and what he shows is that his kingdom does not advance through domination. His kingdom is not going to advance through bending the knee to Satan, bending the knee to power. When he says all the kingdoms of the world can be yours if you bow down, that's the temptation for all of us to align with earthly empires, earthly power structures, so that we might rule, even if we believe that our purpose is to rule rightly, with purity in our hearts, the side note here that I think is fascinating, and when we point to this, I tell people, it's like Satan is offering the kingdoms of the world that he owns. They are his to give. So that's number one. All of the earthly kingdoms, all of the earthly political power structures belong to the prince of the power of darkness.
Really?
Yes. And somehow it's always ironic to me to think, oh, if we can just be in control, if we can be the power, if we can be the government, if we can be the... I'm like, I don't think you understand how sin works in the lives of people. Let me see it every day. I see good people that we think are good people that we elect to office, and they get up there and it doesn't work out exactly to the benefit of all people. It's a height of arrogance. It points to deception itself.
Yes.
And it is about this. So these three temptations reveal how faith can be corrupted when it aligns too closely to economic or religious or political systems that work to dominate, to control in the world. And Jesus rejects these offers, and he shows that his mission will not be about this, that his kingdom is of another world, and that rather than coercion and control and worldly political strength and winning, the message will be humility, love, truth, sacrifice, service. This is an exposure that subverts the logic of empire. He is modeling for us a way of being in the midst of earthly power. And that is the thing that I think really, whether for Jesus it was in the days of the Roman Empire, right, which he dealt with, he lived in the midst of that, or today where we find ourselves. And this is nothing new. You know, the cozying up and the dancing along of Christians trying to, think, well, if we can just be in charge, we can get it all right, has been a temptation for us for 2,000 years. Yeah. And we've never done it well whenever we have been in those seats. We have had control and power.
Yes. I had a mentor say to me one time, the problem with American Christianity is just that it's American Christianity. And when we fuse our Christianity, where our creed starts out, our first creed was a political creed that said Jesus is Lord. And if Jesus is Lord, that was in direct opposition to the Roman creed, which is Caesar is Lord, right? Yeah. And so if we claim Christ as the center of our life, that has to be the shaping element, right? And then that, if we base it also within Pentecost, or the Spirit of God's been poured out on all flesh, that Christ invites to the table all our doctrine says, right? Yeah. And what Christian nationalists want to do is to constrict that aperture to a very tight thing that really is about a type of person, a type of flesh, a type of ideology, where Christ is constantly shocking the religious and the political by who he befriends, who he stands with, who he walks with, who he dies for, who he serves. And for the church to align itself with an ideology that then is opposed to Christ, but represents Christ, is on the verge of then becoming the anti-Christ. And so this is where I think Christian nationalism has to be called out for what it is, which is it is a type of anti-Christ. And this is where Satan comes, I think. Satan never shows up in my life in a pitchfork and smelling like, a sewage.
Sulfur.
Yeah. He always shows up. The presence of that which is not God always shows up as something delicious,
an angel of light,
and promising to me. And so, for us to be led away I think we have to prophetically call that out as what it is it's the anti-Jesus.
Yeah, and there will be people say, and we need to finish. We're about 37 minutes, I think, so we're going to finish. But I would say, like, people will say, but America was founded on Christian values, and we were founded on Christianity. We are a Christian country. Yes, some of that is true, but if you study the history, those founding fathers embedded in this country the separation, which some Christian nationalists don't believe, separation of church and state.
Yeah.
They want a reunification of church and state.
Yeah.
But they did this for a specific historical purpose. They came out of a system where the king was the head of the church.
Yes.
They came out of an embedded system, and they experienced persecution under that embedded system. Because just think, it's not just non-Christians persecuting Christians. They were running away from Christians persecuting Christians, right? So when you study the history and you know the knowledge, you know what they were doing. Yes, they were Christian, and yes, a lot of the values of Christianity show up in the document about the worth of people and everything else. But they created a setup and a system, the non-establishment, the separation of church and state in there. You got to go look at the history. When people go, oh, it shouldn't be there, they didn't mean that. Look at the history. They did mean that. They did mean that.
Yes.
And this is something that I think some people would love to see it go away. But I think, beyond all of that, the issue about Christian nationalism is any Christian, any country, any governmental system, you cannot put your faith and trust in these earthly kingdoms.
Amen.
They will not. No. They will never get you where you want. They will always fail you.
Yes.
And so it starts again. It's internal. You start with, I always tell people, you want to change the government, you want to change the country, starts with you.
Yeah.
Starts with me. One person at a time. That's how I start. Yeah. Go vote for the one that you've deemed most worthy. Run for office. If you think that you do, run for office. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Let your Christian values be a part of your political intersection.
Yes.
But just don't be deceived into thinking that somehow, you have that somehow that the prescriptive power of the government's going to make everything okay.
No.
It actually will make it worse.
Yeah.
So that may not be a hopeful message, Jeff. I don't know here today, but that's where we are. So, hey, I really appreciate this. Make sure you subscribe the podcast, share this with others. This is a conversation I think that's important for the days that we live in.
Amen.
And I think that to continue to have this conversation is important.
Absolutely.
So anything else? All right.
This week we have someone on the podcast.
Russ?
No, Kathleen.
Kathleen McShane.
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
like her.
Kathleen
she owns
McShane.
a vineyard.
Oh, Kathleen
in
McShane.
Napa.
Yeah.
And is doing a lot of work with the TMF around what it means to be grafted. And so I'm hopefully I'd love
more lessons from
This
the
is
vineyard.
not about wine.
No.
This is about the vineyard.
The grafting.
The grafting. And she has this insight because she's been working with grapes and grafting and all this stuff that I was like,
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's great.
That's good. All right, well, we got to go. I'm John Stevens.
I'm Matt Russell.
And this is Pod Have Mercy.